What's up, everybody? Wally Renee here from the Mod Institute. Welcome to this detailed tutorial on how I like to characterize my prints using the technique that I developed a long time ago called the candy coating technique. Now, this is a standard pattern tile that I get embossed, and it's at every workstation at the Mod Institute that has this pattern engraved onto it that reminds me every time that I do an anterior case of what I like to use to characterize that restoration. Where the misty gray and the glass fog are a combination of violet and gray. The mamelon is typically Empress Direct opaque, maybe sometimes with a little bit of white sprinkled in. Sunset is a orange-yellow color that is optional. Halo cream is typically opaque with a splash of white. And then brown is diluted brown in the original unadulterated resin. So again, this is called the candy coating technique. It is where you paint a thin coat of the actual print resin on and then use Empress Direct resin stains. The instruments that we're using in this tutorial are from Comment. That is their 3D printed and milled acrylic finishing and polishing kit. So the first step that I like to do is remove any residual print lines and support lines. Sometimes when you remove supports, it leaves these tiny little goosebumps. This is the Comet felt pad that is in that kit. It is a aluminum oxide impregnated felt pad that is absolutely perfect for this. It is the best thing that I've found to remove supports. I've tried everything. So the reason why I like this particular wheel is because it will remove print lines without actually obliterating your anatomy and microanatomy. So it is gentle, and it also has this ability to kind of remove supports exactly to where they should have been without kind of over ditching the printed structure. And I really like that because there's some other instruments that you could use that are more aggressive, but they'll actually deform the print quite readily because this is the pre-cured state. And so you want something that's going to be super gentle. And again, I want to emphasize that this has not been cured yet in the manufacturer's curing unit. And here we have Onyx Tough from Sprint Ray, but this will also work with many other resins from various different manufacturers. And so now I'm going to alcohol wipe this, and I'm making sure not to leave any residual powder, that there's no little hairs from that felt pad that have been left onto the print, because those will become embedded if you accidentally leave those on. And a little air dry here to once more glance over this and really check with loops and magnification that there's no little hairs, lint, or anything else on the prosthetic. So I have an amber glass vial here filled with Onyx Tough, and I'm going to drop some on the on the tile. The glass vials can be found on Amazon. You want amber so that it blocks out the blue light so it doesn't cure in the little vial. Onyx Tough is one of the better materials to candy coat. Use these disposable brushes and just throw them out afterwards. They're like $5 for 50 or 60 of them. And so they're really cheap. Mix the resin to get all the nanoparticles fully dispersed in the resin before you paint it on. And then paint on a nice, even, thin coat everywhere. So you're looking for that shine to be everywhere that you put it. Because if you miss a spot, it's going to be chalky and kind of white. Also, if you guys are using Sprint Ray ceramic crown material, which is a very nice material, you'll notice that if you over wash it, it gets very frosty. I don't recommend doing that. You should spray it or use a cocktail shaker, or I have a previous video about a automatic mixer that has a 20-second wash cycle. But you can rehydrate it with the liquid resin. And what's interesting with that particular material, it doesn't really candy coat well with a native resin, but it does candy coat really well with Onyx Tough on top. And I know that's really venturing outside of instructions for use and potentially getting into some gray areas, but I've done a lot of units candy coating that material with Onyx Tough, and it works great. Okay, so now we have our prosthetic. This is a provisional prosthetic for a full mouth reconstruction that I printed using Onyx Tough in this particular case. And I'm going to go through my standard kind of characterization protocol. This would be the same if I was doing a permanent 3D printed veneer, which I really love to do out of this material. It's one of my favorite materials to do this out of. And so here we have, in order of placement, brown, opaque, gray, and violet. And again, these are Empress Direct resin stains. So I'm going to use a little bit of that gray and mix it in with the violet. The violet color is what you want to use, not the blue. The blue is too intense. That comes in the Empress Direct kit. The violet is pretty in and of itself. That could be slightly toned down with a little bit of gray. Now here's the brown, and I'm putting the brown in the Onyx Tough, and I'm kind of diluting it down to create this very kind of subdued honey color that is going to be painted on the cervical third. Again, Empress Direct resin stains I find work the best. They're undiluted resin stains that have very similar dimethacrylate-based ester chemistry that is found in the actual unadulterated 3D print resins, so it's not a very different chemistry like you oftentimes find with OptiGlaze and Vita Accent. Those are a little bit different chemistries that don't necessarily mix as well with print resins. There's no incompatibility issues here with Empress Direct and any of the photopolymer resins on the market that I know of. So it kind of works with all of them. And again, it's using nearly identical methacrylate-based chemistry here. So you're going to get kind of no issues with mixing this into the native resin that you print with. And I've tried this technique with pretty much every resin on the market from every manufacturer. So the first step is a little bit of cervical chroma. Now, we're not trying to mimic stain here. What we're trying to do here, and this can be kind of a finesse thing because less is more, is we're trying to mimic the natural glow of dentin that shines through the tooth as the enamel tends to get thinner in the cervical third of the tooth. And it's really important to understand that. This is an optional step, oftentimes skipped, but it gives a little bit of a warm glow to the cervical third. Now, this is also how you could actually change, say, this bleach material that is Hollywood bleach to an A1 or an A2, is you could paint the whole thing with the brown. Now, I would not call that a permanent change, so I don't like to do that for permanent prosthetics, but I will do that for provisionals. Because over the years, it will eventually slowly wear away, and what's left underneath is bleach. The second step is to create that combination of that gray and violet mixture, which was mostly violet, into the incisal third of each tooth. Now, this is kind of just a rough painting on a very thin layer. You have to be careful. If it's too thick, you'll actually start to create unwanted textures here. And you don't have to be so careful with this. It's not a science there. It's less of a straight line. It's more of kind of a messy placement, and that's what you get. And it's a very pretty way to mimic incisal translucency and lower the value of the incisal third. Now we have the opaque here. Now, depending on your effect, you could mix a tiny dollop of white into that opaque to boost the value. But we're letting the material come from the brush tip almost through capillary attraction to the very incisal edge of the tooth to create a little bit of a halo effect. Now, it's not like you're pressing it on the incisal edge. You're just letting it kind of flow from the brush to the edge through that kind of capillary attraction where it just wants to go to the tooth because of that liquid resin there that is from the original candy coat. And it's a very gentle, almost not even touching the edge, okay? So just be careful there. Here I'll show you what it looks like if you put it on too heavy and you get these kind of big white lines. That's not what you want. You want a very fine line that's almost not visible. And if you were to err, you're coming more from the lingual than you are the facial for that halo line. So here we go. You'll see here, it just kind of barely grabs. Beautiful. I love this resin stain material because it is kind of viscous in and of itself, because remember, it's undiluted. And that's the big difference between this and say an OptiGlaze, which is already a pretty diluted resin. All right, now I use this hummingbird beak instrument that is an LM instrument. You could use an endo file, but I'm going to put 3 dots of opaque, Empress Direct opaque, to correspond to each mamelon, almost at the incisal edge, but not quite. Okay, there's a little bit of space there. And again, that one might be a little bit too far away there, but 3 dots of this opaque material. This is an optional step. You could have just stopped where I was before I did the mamelons, but I'm showing you guys, maybe this is more what I would do for a permanent, say like a 3D printed veneer that I'm going to bond on, which is, again, probably my favorite thing to do with this material, Onyx Tough. Take a brush and you're just going to thin it you're going to drag it down to the incisal edge, and then you're going to push it up cervically as well. So you're kind of creating these little highlights that ever so slightly follow the lobes. So these would represent, in a way, the mamelons of the tooth. And you could change the color of this very easily by mixing like a little bit of sunset in with the opaque to create just a little bit more of a color. Now, this is that gray mixed with violet, and I'm creating, kind of cradling these mamelons here, where I'm putting a little dot of violet, and I'm creating the illusion of intense translucency, typically heavy into the 2 facial depressions on the centrals, and then up the marginal line angles there, the mesial line angle, into the facial embrasure. And here I'm just taking a brush and adding a little bit more of that opaque back to the incisal edge. Again, we're ultra zoomed in here, so you guys are seeing everything very, very up close. When you back out and you look at speaking distance or smiling distance, what you're going to get is an effect that is quite remarkable. It's a beautiful kind of natural effect where the teeth just don't look so plain. So again, we're cradling each mamelon with a tiny dollop of the violet mixture that has a mostly violet with just a sprinkle of that gray in there. And you could do that to your preference. Laterals, I typically do 1. While I have the violet gray mixture out, I'm going to go ahead and create the whale tail effect here. It's kind of a U shape where we're almost at the very edge of the tooth, but not quite. We're not going into our kind of halo. So there's the little bit of that opaque resin there. Just going to ever so slightly create the tiniest illusion of a little bit of a brighter area there. Last tooth, I usually don't do anything on the cuspids, especially for provisionals. A little bit of that gray-violet mixture there with that U-shape whale tail. And then again, a little dollop of that opaque. Now remember, this is all kind of mixing in with that original candy coat, which has never been cured. And also, don't forget, the prosthetic has not been cured yet. It was just washed. So just keep that in mind as we go forward here. Beautiful. Just going to kind of re-accentuate that. Sometimes with the brush, you wind up accidentally diluting the mamelon too much. And also just remember, this is a little bit extra. You could have stopped 10 minutes ago at the just the incisal third painted with the violet mixture and then the halo. I realized that the mamelons might be a little bit much for people, and that is okay. I like to go a little bit extra. Here's just a little bit of that opaque cream right there. Maybe just yeah, beautiful. Okay, So now what we need to do is we need to cure this. You need a light with a 385 bulb as well. I recommend Ivoclar's Blue Phase Power Cure. Each tooth is going to be cured for 10 seconds and then again for 10 seconds. So you'll see this is slightly sped up here. So we're making sure that we're going to cure that because, and this is the Ivoclar Vivident Blue Phase Power Cure, my favorite curing light. I have 22 of these in the training center that I have for everybody. So you're going to cure these now. What you want to do here is get the light as close as you can to the teeth without actually touching the teeth. Because if you touch the teeth, you might accidentally create like an imprint or a weird area because of the candy coat. So close as you could get without actually touching. I see sometimes people are so far away when they do this in class that it's not really doing anything. The other light that has a blue 385 bulb is the Velo. That's another good light. But don't use a cheap light here. It's not going to do anything. So again, it was a total of 20 seconds on each tooth. It was kind of 10, and then we went back for another 10. And the reason why we need to do that is we need to cure it enough so that when we paint the oxygen scavenging material, in this case, I love this cover gel from Annexdent USA. This is the best material that I've found to use for this indication of use here, where it's like a really nice optically clear material that you paint onto the facials of wherever you candy coated. So if you candy coated the lingual, you paint the whole thing. And you thin it with your finger on a gloved hand. And by the way, you should definitely always use gloves when you do this kind of stuff. Anytime you deal with liquid resin. Okay, so now we're going to cure again each tooth for 20 seconds. And this is just kind of to tack it. And that cover gel from Annexdent is the secret sauce here. You can dip it in glycerin, in a bowl of glycerin, and put it into the curing unit, which is definitely something that I did for many years using this technique, but I like the cover gel better now. And the reason being is because I could tack it first like this. If you use glycerin, it just drips everywhere and doesn't actually cover the prosthesis, so you have to submerge it in glycerin. If you have a nitrogen curing unit, you could use that. But even with the nitrogen, I like to use the cover gel. So again, you cure each tooth with the cover gel on. So it was 20 seconds a tooth. And now what you're going to do after you do that, you're going to take the whole entire thing to your curing unit, to the ProCure. And you're going to cure it in the curing unit for the full manufacturer's recommended time. Okay? So you don't want to really double cure prosthetics like this because they shrink and things like that if you over cure them. So you want to just cure it for the original manufacturer's recommended IFU. So this would be the ProCure 2. Drop it in. And then now let's see what it looks like. It comes out, the glycerin cover gel kind of becomes very thin from the heat in the curing unit. So we're going to use a dry, not an alcohol wipe. You don't really want to hit it with alcohol anymore. Alcohol degrades resins, and so you were using a dry cloth to wipe the cover gel off. And what you get is this beautiful surface finish. And this is where you could basically be done at this point. But for those who are overachievers, you could also hand polish this. And to hand polish, I like to use this kit from Comment. This was the 3D printing finishing kit that we helped develop with them. We just basically used everything that they had and figured out what worked best for prints. We don't get any proceeds if you buy this kit, so just understand that it's not some sketchy thing. Buy it if you like it. There's other things out there that probably work similarly. I just haven't had the time to figure that out because we've been using these for the past 2 years. So it's that yellow, greeny looking thing. I think that has chrome oxide nanoparticles in it. And you mix that with some diamond paste. We're working on our own diamond paste because we've not been super happy with the pastes out there. But you go ahead and hit it with this chrome oxide high polisher here with that special paste. And you get a mirror-like finish on it that you could see your reflection in. This is key. This is kind of what differentiates a really nice 3D printed veneer from like somebody who slapped some OptiGlaze on there and just bonded it in. Because despite what a lot of people say, the OptiGlaze actually, and trust me, it does wear away. It won't meet your aesthetic kind of eye. You'll still see a little bit of on there after 6 months, and then by a year, it's pretty much gone. So this is what we got. I hit it with a lathe to save time with that diamond paste, using that brush, horsehair brush mixed in with chamois, and you get this beautiful prosthetic that has some subtle characterization to it. It's not overly done. You'll see some translucency effects. You'll see just the kind of shadowing of mamelons around your it's not kind of hit you in the face like, oh my goodness, this thing looks crazy, but and you could control that based off of how much you put and what intensity you do it at. But again, guys, this is the candy coat technique, a technique that I've been using for almost 3 years to finish my prints, and I have some really good clinical results with it. Not that OptiGlaze is a bad technique or Vita Accent. I think those are just more geared for temporaries. I do finish my posteriors using the same exact technique. The only difference is with posteriors is you really have to make sure you don't let it puddle in your grooves and anatomy, because it will just kind of wipe away that stuff. I love teaching this in my classes on 3D printing. We do it all together and we make sure that we do it nicely. Okay, so let's try this in. This is, again, a full mouth reconstruction, provisional prosthetic, beautiful fit. Love printed and how they fit. Such a nice thing to just have them drop in. So cool. Okay, so from here now, guys, we do a lot of hands-on training at the Mod Institute. Would love to have you down and teach you guys how to do this in person.